This is the full set review for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This is part 2, so we're going to cover all of the red and black commons and uncommons today. I'm going to go a little bit fast, but if you miss anything or have any questions, I'll answer them between cards. And you can always go check out the VOD or full set review on YouTube. I am doing this with my real face instead of the VTuber because I found that hands are very helpful for getting my point across. So instead of the limited resources review system, which I find to be a little outdated for today's modern synergy draft format, we use the scuffle review system, which is just something that I came up with in order to help you draft the way you want to draft as opposed to the way that I draft. So I give everything a number value on a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is a card that you should never play. A 2 is a card you should do your best not to play. 3 is replaceable. You'll have some 3s. Don't worry too much about it. 4 is solid. Don't be upset if you have to put a 4 into your deck. 5 is a strong card. 6 is a card that you will always want to play in a given color or deck. Generally, you're going to want to try and get your deck to be 4s, 5s, and 6s as much as possible. A 7 is a reason to play this deck. Usually it's something that's a signpost or a powerful rare. An 8 is a card you're going to do some work to play, something that you would splash for, or change your deck up, or maybe take worse cards in the future in order to make that card work. 9 is a reason to be in a color. If you open an Oko in Wilds of Eldraine, you're blue-green now. If you open an Oko in Original Eldraine, if you open a Gruff Triplets in Wilds of Eldraine, well, you're green now. And a 10 is a card you'll always play. They're very rare. Something like an Umezawa's Jite, a Wormcoil Engine, you will just put that card into your deck, full stop. I haven't done any 10s in a while. They're pretty rare. Compared to what a lot of other people do, I also give everything a floor value. That's the worst a card will usually be. A ceiling value. That's the best a card will usually be. And then an effort value required to bridge that gap. So you're always going to try and bring any given card from the floor to the ceiling with effort. So sometimes a card will be a high effort card because it's only good in some matchups. You'll put it in the sideboard, or it's only good in some decks. But if you first pick it, you can probably get that card to that ceiling. So today we are doing all of the black and red commons and uncommons. So we're going to do a quick overview of black first, but we're going to do a revisit really quick to yesterday's multicolored cards. Generally speaking, there's 4 cards that deal 1 damage or give -1/-1 in this set. That kills 9% of creatures. And 6 cards that deal 2 damage or give -2/-2, 42% of creatures. 1 card that deals 3 damage that kills 67%. 3 cards that deal 4 damage that kills 87%. That's weird. Like, usually we have a ton of 3 damage cards, and not a lot. Like, there's very few 1 toughness creatures in the set. It's only 13 creatures in the set with 1 toughness. That's not counting mercenaries. It's good to be able to kill the mercenaries. But we've got 53 2 toughness creatures, 43 toughness creatures, 32 4 toughness creatures. This is weird. And what this does is it kind of standardizes the power level of the commons and uncommons we have available to us. But it also, it kind of bans the removal. Bans with a D. Can't say that word. Kind of bands the removal together and changes what's powerful. There's also a ton of removal in this set. I think the most we've ever had, we're at like 45 removal spells in the set. And that stretches a little bit of what some of the removal spells are, but it holds up. It's scary in general. All right, I'm going to take a 60-second break while this ad runs and drink a little bit of water. So if you're here on YouTube only, do apologize. We're going to wait 60 seconds here. Okay, I think I can switch to this one now. Great. I need to shrink a little. That's the problem. Just a teeny bit off the side. As soon as we're back, we'll launch right in. Sorry, subscribers, I appreciate you, but I have a lot of people who want to see this who are only here for this bit. All the rest of it, nice and tuned. This is a little off. Why is this off? Here we go. All right, ads over. Let's get into it. So, green, black, grave break. That is the archetype where you care about your graveyard. So we saw a lot of crazy payoffs in green for this, lots of things that reward the self mill. Black tends to be a little bit more supporting for this archetype. So when you're green and black, you need to think about how you're putting cards into your graveyard, how you're taking them out again, and what your plan for the kill is. And you can do that by grinding with cards like Honest Rutstein. You can do that with a big explosive spell like Rise of the Varmints, which makes a ton of varmints, one for each creature in your graveyard. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. Green black is also great for splashing. It's green in general has some solid fixing. There's not a lot of great artifact fixing, but there's a lot of good white cards to splash and a few good black cards to splash, or blue cards to splash. Blue black crimes is the demur archetype. So the big problem with blue black crimes that I see is that there's two different speeds on the crimes. So there's a kind of aggressive tempo oriented shell for the crimes, like with lots of bouncing and evasive creatures. There are some really good flyers available in black and even more in blue. We'll cover the blue ones tomorrow, but you kind of have to decide whether you're going to be more tempo or controlling. So like Intimidation Campaign here on the right, this card is very good if you're a more controlling deck with lots of removal, but it takes a long time to actually generate the card advantage. 3 mana, draw a card is very good in a control deck and a lot weaker in some of the more tempo oriented decks because you are giving up time to play this card. So even though they all care about crimes, there's a huge difference between like Lazov that we talked about yesterday, which clones things and grows with each crime, and Intimidation Campaign, which generates card advantage with each crime. So you have to plan for your speed. The valuable picks in the blue-black decks are going to be the ones that go into all the decks. The cheaper removal spells, not necessarily the tempo spells, or the cheaper card advantage spells, or the creatures that trade up pretty consistently. So while you're drafting this, you need to figure out how much time you need, whether or not you really need to kill each given creature. You have some good bodies available in black, so you might just want to block or stick behind them for a little while. And where your card advantage is coming from. Black tends to want to pull cards out of the graveyard a little bit more, get some raised dead effects. Blue has a lot of very powerful, strict card advantage available, and ideally you want a little bit of a mix, but they're not super compatible. Not all the time. Black, white, sack, or aristocrats. You need to figure out pretty early whether you care a lot about outlaws specifically, or whether you just need bodies in general. Are you using your extra creatures to generate value or just kill your opponent? You can lean a little bit more into the white side, take more flyers in black, use more mercenaries in order to make big creatures, and then just use the bodies to get the kill. Maybe you can sack a bunch of creatures at the end with a Blood Artist effect to get that big kill all at once. Or are you going to be generating value? This card, Baron Bertram Greywater, can do a little bit of both. You can use some treasures to make 1/1s which block, which draw cards. You can get a ton of value out of some stuff like that. Or you can just make bodies go wide, get the kill. You should also try and figure out pretty early how you're staying alive. Chump blocking is a really good way to do it. Bertram makes lifelinkers. You have lifelink available, or you can just get the kills. You also have to decide pretty early do you care about assembling an engine? Like, you can put together some pretty strong engines, but you can also just derive value from singular creatures or recursive attackers. Maybe you can splash something like Honest Rutstein and try and recover this black-white creature we looked at yesterday, the Ruthless Lawbringer. Card is really good. You also have to kind of choose where your removal is coming from, because you can get enough removal out of just creatures to worry a little bit less. Herbivore, thanks so much for the follow. I really appreciate that. Sorry you didn't get the big explosion. We don't do that just for the set review. All right, and so finally, red-black outlaws. Red and black have access to so much removal. There's a ton of removal available. You're going to want to pick your removal a little bit after your engine pieces. We have a ton of removal. There's a removal spell in pretty much every pack because of the breaking news cards. But you you're going to have to weigh how much you need removal at any given point. There's also a lot of cards that are a lot of work to get going. Like at knife point, very powerful, really fantastic, not free. If you play this as a 3-mana enchantment that gives you first strike on your turn, that's not going to be good enough. But if you play this as a way to generate a 1/1 mercenary every turn, you're going to win the game. So your removal is plentiful. You need to decide whether you're an aggressive deck or a combo deck. I like at knife point a lot, but it's more of a combo card. We also looked at Vial Smasher yesterday. That goes into every black-red deck, but it's very aggressive and it lets you finish the game late. You should try and figure out whether you're going to be a more exalted style deck, meaning you're using your mercenaries to power up one big flyer or maybe one big attacker that hits every turn, or you can just go wide, attack with all the mercenaries. There's a few good ways to pump your team, but you have to build towards them. It's not easy. You can get some pretty cool engines going with different treasures and outlaws and mercenaries, but you kind of want to focus. Like, if you build your curve right, you can have a deck that maybe pivots from the early game aggression into something that's more of an engine, but it's not easy. Hey, Fina! Oh, I love this. I love this shirt. This is my favorite shirt. I was like, do I want to do this as a VTuber or do I want to do this as a webcam? And I'm like, okay, but I'm wearing this shirt. I should definitely just use the webcam. Okay, black is deep in this format. Let me scooch myself a little bit so you can see all the questions. All right, so overall, your cards in black compared to green. So we looked at green yesterday. Green cards are flexible. Most of the green cards can go into any given archetype, or you can build like a sub archetype in, like maybe you've got some deserts which you're using to ramp, or some plot cards which you're using to ramp, and then you can take those early and build into any given archetype. The black cards tend to each fit into 2 of the archetypes. You have 2 options for most of them. So you want to aim for a little bit of flexibility, especially that binary flexibility early on. The cards that go into all 4 archetypes are all rated a little bit higher. The cards that go into 1 or 2 of the archetypes, you need to focus on for specific archetypes, because the difference between a card that is an outlaw or a card that commits a crime ends up being pretty major, and it can be a disaster in this format if you get stuck with a whole bunch of like creatures that aren't outlaws and the deck that wants outlaws for your engine pieces. It's surprisingly combat oriented, especially compared to black in the past. Attackers are really easy to get. So your engine, the cards that generate value or kill creatures, you can value them a little bit higher. You have to sequence carefully in every aspect of this format, but even more so in black, because your sequencing even within each turn is also very relevant. What you do before and after you attack, how you grow your creatures with your mercenaries, which creatures you want to die on both sides of the board matters a lot. And then lastly, crimes and outlaws are surprisingly incompatible in black specifically. They're very compatible in other colors. Like red has a lot of crimes that generate outlaws. White has a lot of outlaws that generate outlaws. Black doesn't have as many bridges, at least at common and uncommon. So while you're playing, you have a few questions to keep in mind. How are you generating your value? What kills what? Can you use combat instead? You may not have to kill your opponent's 3-power attacker if you have or 3 toughness attacker if you have a 3-power blocker. How are you using your graveyard? Do you care about your graveyard? Are you putting cards into your graveyard? Green-black specifically cares the most about your graveyard, but there's also a lot of things that matter in your graveyard in black alone. What needs to die? Black has some death triggers that it cares about. Are you going to have to make it die yourself? Can you make it die by attacking? You can if you're putting on enough pressure. Where do your types matter? Treasures matter, artifacts matter. There's a lot of powerful seeming cards that just don't have relevant types, and you lose value there. And then lastly, what crimes matter? Like, there are some cards that need you to commit a crime every turn. There are some cards that need you to commit a crime only once. So you're going to have to pay attention and sequence you have to build a curve, not just on how much each card costs, but on what each card is doing for you at each point of the curve. If you need to commit a crime on turn 3, you need to make sure that your turn 4 play, like if you care about crimes on turn 3, you need to make sure that your turn 2 or turn 4 plays enable that. All right, on to the cards. Let me... I had this all figured out yesterday, but apparently... Need to just move a few things around. All right, water. All right, so up first, we have Ambush Gigapede. I gave it a 3 with a floor of a 2 and a ceiling of 4, and that's because 2 toughness is a big liability on your 6 drop. You don't want to treat this as a creature, you want to treat this as a removal spell. So if you're treating this as a removal spell, and your opponent is attacking with a 5 power creature and a 2/2, then you get to kill that 2/2 and then use the Gigapede to block. Now 6 mana for a relatively fragile removal spell, even if it kills 2 creatures, is a little weak. It is 1 to 10 herbivore. Here, I'll do this one more time just because I talked a lot. This is the scale. I covered it at the beginning, but it's on a scale of 1 to 10 with a floor, a ceiling, and then an effort required to bridge the gap. So on Ambush Gigapede, I gave it a 3. I think this card is pretty weak. Sometimes you'll need to play this because you need to find card advantage somewhere. Sometimes you'll need to play this because you need your removal spells to be a little bit stronger, and then sometimes you'll need to play this because you're a flash deck and you can't actually cast spells on your turn and still trigger the cards you care about. However, there's better ways to do all of those things. So keep the Gigapede in mind because you'll have to play it sometimes to fill things in. That's why that ceiling of a 4 is there, but it's never going to be the best version of what you need to happen. So I gave it a ceiling of a 4, and it's usually going to play at that 3. That's just replaceable. It's a replaceable card. It's not the worst. All right, up next we have Binding Negotiation. Yeah, I mean, like, it fills a role. Sometimes you're gonna have a ton of recursion. You're just not gonna have a top end. But like, you don't want this to be your top end. You don't want this to even be the removal spell at the top end. But it has a place, which I think is cool. Like, I think it's great set design that this card isn't unplayable. Yeah, like it's a 2-for-1 removal spell, but even in red, we have a good 2-for-1 removal spell for 1 less mana. You only play this when you need a creature that is a removal spell. This has lots of little places where it fits, but it's never the best card for that. All right, Binding Negotiation. This is a card I came back to a lot. Mainly because currently this is the only way to interact with a card that your opponent has plotted. And the worst case scenario of 2 mana distress, like 2 mana take a card, make them discard it, that's not terrible. There are a lot of very scary card combinations and engines your opponent is going to be able to assemble in this format, and knowing your opponent's hand and being able to disrupt what they're doing is very valuable. So I gave this a 5. That's a really high score for a targeted discard spell, because this is one of the few ways that you can interact, that you can stop what your opponent is doing in black. So like, if your opponent is trying to assemble a big turn with a lot of mercenaries and aristocrats finish, or if they're trying to set up a double spell turn in blue-red, or trying to avoid casting a spell in blue-white, Binding Negotiation is often the only way you'll have to stop that in black. I'm actually going to go revisit Humiliate. I think black-white actually has more options specifically, so I like Binding Negotiation more in a black-white or black-blue deck than a black-green or a black-white deck. But like, cards like the Varmints in your opponent's black-green deck, they're going to plot that, and then you have no way to stop that the entire game. So Binding Negotiation ends up being a pretty valuable card for you. Right. So I think this card is pretty good. Yeah, it's Pilfer with upside. I think it's solid. So yeah, I gave it a 5, and the ceiling is a 5, but it's usually going to play at that ceiling. I'll be playing this card pretty high. I'll be picking this card pretty high when I'm in a non-white black deck. All right, this is another card I have to revisit. I looked at this card like 6 times. So this is a cool card because, ignoring the +1/+1 counter on it if creature died, a flyer with a variable cost is valuable. A 3 mana 2/1 flying isn't great. A 2 mana 2/1 flying, but you have to wait a turn, is solid. But the fact that you can pay either 3 mana or 2 mana on this, meaning that it is your 3-drop and your 2-drop is pretty valuable. The big problem is that it doesn't really slot in to enough of the black archetypes. So I gave it a 5, but we're giving it a revisit because we're going to have to see how happy I am to play with this in some of the archetypes. But black is pretty happy to just, I'm gonna go ahead and lower this. No, see, like really this is a 4.5. It's how I think of this card. But the rate's good. Like, it's not trivial to put the counter on it. This is not going to be a 3-mana 3/2 as often as you want it to be. But the flying is good, and there's not a ton of good ways to punish the 1 toughness. It also comes in with a counter, which is nice. It's going to be a linchpin in a lot of the black decks, but like in black-red, I'm going to be prioritizing an outlaw over the buzzard most of the time. But it's going to perform pretty well, especially in most of the aggressive decks. It's just an efficient flyer. All right, Blood Hustler. So this is one of the very few ways. This is one of the very few self-enablers for crimes. It's a good 2-drop. It does. The threat of activation here is much better than the actual activation. Like, you get to attack this into your opponent's 1/2 or 2/2 pretty often, and leaving up 4 mana is solid in a lot of situations. The reason I gave this a 6 is because there's only 3 repeated ways in the whole set to activate a crime. There's only 3 activated abilities that trigger crimes at common or uncommon across all of the cards. And this is the most expensive one, but it's also a pretty significant payoff. Paying 4 mana to put a counter on it is great as a threat of activation. Being able to, like, if you play this on turn 2, on turn 3 you have a removal spell to make it into a 2/2, and then on turn 4 you can attack this into your opponent's 3/3s with the mana up, or into your opponent's 2/2s with the mana up, and then activate it if they block. But you don't want to have to activate it if they block. The threat of that activation is more valuable. But compared to a lot of the growing crime creatures, you can draw this on turn 6, and it's not a terrible draw. Black outlaw decks are really good at dealing these last points of damage. They're really good at making your opponent lose a little bit of life or dealing damage near the end, whether that's because red has cards like Skewer the Critics, or black has cards like Blood Hustler or the Outlaw Blood Artist, which we'll look at in a bit. So I gave it a 6. I think it'll usually play near that ceiling of a 6. That floor of a 4, that's if, like, it can be bad against a very aggressive deck to play a 2-mana 1/1, but if you have removal in your deck, if you have the ability to play this and Skewer the Critics or commit a crime somewhere, then this is a 2-mana 2/2 that grows and threatens to grow. So you'll see that a lot. The threat of activation from a crime is more valuable than the crime on its own. Yes. I mean, you expect your opponent to kill this, but there's just not that many punishments for 1 toughness. All right, Boneyard Desecrator. So I promise not all the black cards are this good. We just alphabetically get a lot of good ones at the beginning. I think this guy is very solid. We've seen a lot of 4-mana 3/3 style menace creatures underperform in the past. This one's good. Being able to grow at instant speed, enable your sack outlets is great. It's not difficult to sack an outlaw to make a treasure. Like, turning an outlaw into a treasure is very valuable. There's a lot of really good, powerful ways to reward generating treasures. I mean, even with just Baron Bertram Greywater, sacrificing a rogue to make a treasure and a rogue every turn is very good. And the fact that it makes a treasure, it means that this very quickly becomes 1 mana to activate. It very quickly becomes only 1 mana to turn one of your rogues in. You do want very badly to be an Outlaw's deck with this card, but you are often going to be an Outlaw's deck, and you don't need to be maxed out on Outlaws for this card to be good. It also, a lot of the creatures that are not Outlaws benefit from creatures dying. So, like, the fact that Black Snag Buzzard gets a counter because you, even though it's not an outlaw, means that it still ends up having a little bit of synergy with other cards. I'm going crazy. Why are all my pictures in slightly different sizes today? What happened? to make them all slightly different sizes. So yes, I think this card is very strong in the sack deck, but it has a place in a lot of the non-sack decks. So like in black red is outlaws, black white cares about sacrifice, black green cares about creatures in the graveyard. The only place where I don't like this card is blue black. But it's not a terrible body even in the blue black deck, and you can enable it within black alone. So if a card is good in 3 of the archetypes, usually I'll give it at least a 5. All right, up next, Consuming Ashes. Not a lot to say about it. It's good removal. It's exiling, which is pretty relevant in this format. 4 mana, exile a creature at instant speed. I like that. 0 effort. I gave it a 5. Is always going to play as a solid removal spell. You will take cards that you need for your given archetype over it, but otherwise you're going to be pretty happy to play it. The only thing that makes this something I want to revisit is I don't consider double black to be a major cost, but we may find that to be untrue in the future. Oh, thank you so much, Copper. I love this shirt too. I like the evolutions. I like stained glass. It worked out. Okay, up next we've got Corrupted Conviction. Great in black white, great when you have extra bodies. Removal is pretty good, but it will only ever draw you cards, so it ends up having diminishing returns. I only gave it a 3. That's not because the card is bad. That's because we have replacements. Like in the past, in other sets, we have had difficulty getting enough sacrifice outlets. So cards like Corrupted Conviction or Village Rites have been a lot better. In this set, there's a lot of good things to feed your creatures to, in black and in red. It's not that it's bad, but it is replaceable. You will find other ways to sacrifice your creatures or protect them from removal. You will find other places to generate card advantage. If you don't have those, pick up Corrupted Conviction. It's not the end of the world. I gave it a 3 with a floor of a 2. It's usually going to feel fine. All right, Desert's Due. Okay, this was a pretty interesting one. If this card is 2 mana, give -2/-2, you're not too happy with it. If this card gives -3/-3, you're quite happy with it. So the question becomes, how many Deserts do you need to reliably have exactly 1 in play when Desert's Due comes down? I think I'm pretty happy playing a Desert's Due or 2 if I'm loaded on removal, or if I have 3 to 5 deserts. But that's fine. Like, the card is fine removal. It gets better the more deserts you have. Most of the similar spells are 2 mana Coffer, but it only sacrifices creatures, and you don't have... It goes... So, like, the ceiling of a 5, the more spare cheap creatures you have, the more this goes up, and the more additional spells you have. Like, there's a lot of cards that make Corrupted Conviction better. Having some of the blue cards that care about twin spelling make Corrupted Conviction better. Having some of the 1-drops that we're going to look at today that die into Mercenaries make Corrupted Conviction a little bit better. But it doesn't fill a role to the same degree that the other sack outlets do. Like this Boneyard Desecrator, this is a sacrifice outlet that fulfills a role. It builds an engine, it grows, it kills. And being only 1 mana is relevant, but it's very tough to get cards stuck in, like cards that have any risk of being stuck in your hand in this format end up being a huge liability. So like, it's not bad. 3 is playable, but it's not great. It is better for removal counter. Yeah. We'll talk about some of the 2 mana ones today as well. Desperate Bloodseeker. This card is a great role player, but a 2 mana 2/2 lifelink is just pretty good in this format. Like, time is valuable, and being able to buy your time on a good body is solid. It sucks that it's not an outlaw, but you're pretty happy to mill yourself in a green-black deck, and you're pretty happy to commit a crime in a black-red or a blue-black deck. You do have to kind of slot this into archetypes. It doesn't do a lot for you in black-white or blue-black. Well, it doesn't do a lot for you in black-white or black-red. It's very good in green-black and the crime one, blue-black. Yeah, so floor of 4, that's like, it's still a solid 2-drop. It's still a solid 2-drop as a 2 mana 2/2 with lifelink. You're happy to play it in that role, but you'll pick it a lot higher if you care about milling yourself or if you care about committing a crime. I like this card. I think it's cool. I gave it a 5, floor of 4, ceiling of 6, medium effort. Plays as a 4 in the cards in the decks where it's just a 2-drop. Plays as a 6 in the decks where you want crimes and mill. Fake Your Own Death. I gave this a low score and then went and looked at all of the ETBs and deaths. You can get a huge amount of value out of Fake Your Own Death. There's very good Enter the Battlefields effects. You will commit a crime, I'm sure, at least once by casting on your opponent's card, and the treasure is relevant. The treasure is a powerful rectangle in this set. There's even 1-drops that I'm happy to let die with Fake Your Own Death. I think this is we've seen this card before. We've seen this effect all the time. I think this is one of the best we've seen this card. I do put it on diminishing returns. I don't want too many copies of this, but I'll usually play the first copy and the second copy. And I want to pair it. I want good cards to protect. But this is a format where being able to protect your threats at instant speed is valuable on its own. Being able to generate a treasure is valuable, and being able to get second uses out of death and Enter the Battlefield's effects are valuable. All right, Forsaken Miner. Wow, I gave a lot of 5s in a row. That's just a coincidence. Very good if you're aggressive. Very good if you are outlaws. Weirdly not amazing if you are committing a ton of crimes. Like, this has to be an attacker that you clear the way for, but if you have enough removal, you can keep committing the crime. This is better with a few ways to commit crimes and a lot of ways to use a body than it is with a lot of ways to commit crimes. But a 1-mana 2/2 is a very aggressive attacker. The trick is keeping your opponent off of having a 3 toughness blocker, and that's not inherently easy. I'm going to keep the scores, but I'm going to go ahead and raise the effort to a medium because I do think it's some work to make sure that this keeps attacking. It's better with cards that sacrifice it over and over again than with cards that commit crimes over and over again. Committing a few crimes is trivial. Committing a lot of crimes is difficult, just like in real life. No. So once the card changes Zones Ogre for Fake Your Own Death, then the effect is gone. So if you cast 3 Fake Your Own Deaths, it only works 1 time still because it goes to the graveyard, trigger happens. When it comes back, then it's a new card. The game considers it to be a new card. All right, up next, Heartless Pillage. I don't think this is a Mind Rot format. I do think this card is solid if you need the treasure, but it's difficult to make use of the treasure and attack your opponent in time for this to be relevant. There's so many good ways to generate value that if you're not hitting the last 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, then you probably don't want this card. But if you have a use for the treasure and you're committing and a use for the crime and you're good at attacking to enable the treasure, then the card's solid without being good. I agree. I think there's some really cool flavor text anomaly. I love all the breaking news card flavor text. They're just all headlines. Homestead robbed for 3rd time this week. Hang on. There were some really good ones yesterday too in the green. Yeah, like this card is better than Mind Rot, but Mind Rot's still not great. Yes, I agree with that, Flutterdev. This is a very powerful sideboard card. That's why I gave it some medium effort and a ceiling of a 5. We're going to take a very short break while all this ad runs, 90 seconds. I feel like I have no control over the ads anymore. I used to be good. All right, 90-second break. I'm going to drink some water. All the cards are different sizes and it's driving me crazy. They used to all be the same when I saved them all. Ad for the water. Water, don't waste it. Yeah, I know that some people don't see the ads, and I know that all the subs don't care about the ads, but I needed the water anyway. I love this card, by the way. I actually thought it was so awkward. I'm like, is this a jumpstart card? Because sometimes they do that. They include them in. Oh, it's windy out. Must be a storm. I forgot everyone can watch me mess with my hair now. I gotta remember that. Oh, so Jumpstart is like an additional set that you would get packs for and you could just play. Oh, thanks, Copper. I put a lot of work in to these set reviews because I think it's important. Like, I think it makes a huge difference for me. But also, this is for the gathering.gg. If you like this stuff, you can check out the spreadsheets and all the notes for free with no ads over on the gathering.gg. Okay, so up next, Hollow Marauder. Very cool card. So the question here is, when is this a card you're happy to play? How much mana are you willing to pay for a 4/2 flying Ravenous Rats? I think 4 mana. I'm happy to play this card for 4 mana. I'm ecstatic to play this card for 1 mana. At 5 mana, it's okay. But the fact that, like, the problem with cards like Mind Rot is your opponent can just run out of cards. You might not actually hit anything with the Mind Rot. This doesn't have that issue because if they can't discard a card, you draw a card. If they discard a land, you draw a card. This is very often just going to be a 3-for-1, and it's a great payoff for the black-green graveyards deck. I'm raising this. I think that this card is really good. I think it's worth the effort. So if this is 7 mana, it's bad. If this is 6 mana, it's bad. If it's 5 mana, it's okay. If it's 4 mana, it's great. If it's 3 mana, it's a 7. If it's 3 or less mana. But a 4/2 flyer is a lot of damage. It's a real clock, and always getting to draw a card is great. Like, your worst case scenario with this card is your opponent discards nothing and you draw a card. Your best case scenario is you power this out pretty early and your opponent pitches a relevant land or creature and you draw a card. I think it's really cool and worth being, like, it has a relevant type, and flying is very powerful in this set. Love this guy. All right. Up next, Lively Dirge. So I like this one. I gave it a floor of a 2 with a ceiling of a 6. If you really don't want to be... There's a lot of corner cases for this card because it's got Spree. So if you pay 3 mana to Entomb, that's bad. You don't want to be paying 3 mana to Entomb. But paying 4 mana to pick up 2 creatures to play is reasonable. And picking up 5 mana to make a creature from your library into play and a creature from your graveyard into play is solid. So I gave it that floor of a 2 because you have to put some work into reanimating the cards that you want. But that ceiling of a 6, that's if you are a dedicated mill deck, if you have good cards to pick up, especially in black-green. So hold up. I just want to highlight this because we talked about it yesterday and it's very relevant to the black-green decks in general. This Ankle Biter. I think Ankle Biter is really good in general because it's usually going to trade 1-for-1 with something, and there's a lot of good ways to pick it up. So, like, being able to search up an Ankle Biter and then pick up an Ankle Biter and a 3-mana spell, a relevant, strong 3-mana creature, is very good. Oh, thanks so much, Sirgovitz. I'll let you know. I'm gonna put them all up on YouTube and get them up on Twitter tonight, and we'll finish up tomorrow night after work. But yeah, tomorrow we'll finish all the commons and uncommons, and we'll do all the rares afterwards, and made me happy you stopped by. But I like this card. It's not easy to play with, but it does a lot of work. All right, up next, Morning Surprise. Oh, this is not the right slide. Hold up. All right, this is the wrong slide, so let's go ahead and review this fresh. So, okay, I definitely just went down to Lively Dirge and then went up to Murder and missed the one in the middle. Okay, so this is cool. We've seen cards like this be pretty good in the past. Emergency Weld in Brothers War. How often is this a 2-for-1? I think this is a 2-for-1 a fair amount of the time, as long as you can put cards into your graveyard. And because you do have to put cards into your graveyard, that means it's going to end up at a medium effort card because you have to put some work into this. But making that Mercenary is very, very relevant, and putting a body down on your recursion is very relevant. So if it's a 2-for-1 consistently, that's a 5. Since it's not consistently a 2-for-1, that's a 4. But sometimes that Mercenary is going to be worth more than a whole card by itself, and you can get some pretty powerful things back. So let's put that ceiling of a 6 with a floor of a 3. No, because you really have to have something you want back at that 2. But it's relevant. It's a nice option. is not a ton for value. Like a 2-mana, like compare this to 2-mana draw 2 cards. I think that's where we need to be. This is pretty close in this set, the 2-mana draw 2 cards. All right, that looks right. A little off. This is pretty close to 2-mana draw 2. But it's not 2-mana draw 2 on turn 2. It's 2-mana draw 2 on turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. So it goes up the better the cards you have back. And that's not necessarily a power. The better the cards you can get back are, the better this card is. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting back a rare bomb. It means you're getting back what you need. And it puts down a blocker. Yes, but you do have to have that creature card in your graveyard. You have to have it die. The recursion in this set is very powerful. We have 3 good raised dead effects available, and a lot of good reanimation spells, and all of those cards together have diminishing returns. When you have as many cards as are available as raised dead effects, you can pick them all a little bit lower. I do think this card is quite strong, but I'm only gonna give it a 4 because I find it replaceable. I'll go ahead and raise the floor to a 3 though, because like getting back anything makes you pretty happy. But I'll keep that ceiling of a 6 because the more options you have, the more mill you have, the more you care about that mercenary, the better this card gets. And the more you're missing, the better card this gets. All right, up next, Murder. Straight up, destroy a creature. Black is a little bit tough. I gave it a 5 for a 5 ceiling of 5. I think this card is directly comparable to the first removal spell we looked at, Consuming Ashes. 1 more mana for the exile makes it a little bit weak. Double black is fine. I do think this card is significantly stronger here than it was in MKM. I think removal in general is pretty weak in MKM. So I only gave this same card a 4 in MKM. Hey, Pup. Hi. Hello. I'm doing a set review right now, so you got to be patient. But I do think that this card is a lot better than it was in the past set, and like in past non-MKM sets, I would have put this card higher. But the fact is, you have removal available. Removal is good in this set. All the removal ends up being about half a point lower, not because removal is bad, but because it's plentiful. There are a total of 45 cards in this set that kill creatures compared to the usual 28 to 33. Like, we have a full 12 extra removal spells, including all these. So there's 1 breaking news card in every pack. Almost all of them kill creatures. So like, we just have a removal slot in packs from now on. So that's the only reason that Murder's only a 5. All right, neutralize the guards. This card would be better if more creatures had 1 toughness, but it's a good combat trick that gives treat this card like a combat trick, not like a sweeper. If you treat this card like a combat trick, you can get a 2-for-1 out of it that surveils, but you have to think and plan and sequence in order to get the right cards into play at the right time. If your opponent is blocking your 4-4 with a 3-3 and a mercenary, neutralize the guards is great. If your opponent is blocking your 2-2-2s with 2-2-2s, neutralize the guards is great, but you have to set that up. That's not free. You are going to have to put time into making neutralize the guard worth multiple cards. I don't think exile is relevant, but not better. Exile is really good against opposing black and green decks and doesn't do anything relevant against red and white decks. There are a few red cards with death triggers, but for the most part, Murder and Exile are going to be very similar. However, like, I'll splash a Mourner's Surprise in the right deck. I won't splash a Murder. But yeah, it can be. Neutralize the guards is really good if that Surveil is actively valuable to you, which is not for every deck. Nezumi Linkbreaker. Here's a really cool card. Like, the thing about Linkbreaker is it's a 1-mana 1/1 outlaw that makes an outlaw, which means it triggers your outlaw things twice. This is a good 1-drop. It slots nicely into a lot of the different archetypes. But you got to make sure you have a use for it. Cut this if you don't have multiple uses for a body. A lot of Nezumi Linkbreakers make cards like Corrupted Conviction a lot better. But for the most part, this is just solid all the time. I really like it. Overzealous Muscle. I gotta lower this to a 4. I like this card a lot as a 5 mana 5/4, but you're limited on how many 5 mana 5/4s you can play. The reason this card is cool is because you can commit a crime at instant speed to give Overzealous Muscle indestructible. You can also do this multiple times. This is one of the few things you can trigger multiple times. And you might say, well, that's not relevant. But if you commit a crime and your opponent murders the muscle, you can commit a crime again in response. The reason this card is good is because let's say you have a 5 mana 5/4. Let's say your opponent also has an Overzealous Muscle. You play your 5 mana 5/4. You can't commit a crime. Oh no. You still attack with the muscle. Your opponent has to respect the threat of you committing a crime to make this indestructible, whether or not you can do it. The threat of activation on this card is more valuable than the fact that it becomes indestructible. The muscle or the link breaker? Oh wait, so I mean, I played Vermintide. I've killed a lot of these Nezumi. That's right, Ogre. So I like this card. I like the threat of activation. I like attacking with it. I think it's solid. I did just drop it from a 5 to a 4, but it's replaceable at the top end, but still solid. There's very few crimes that commit crime. There are very few cards that commit crimes for 1 mana, Flutter Dev. Most of them cost 2 or more, and there's only 3 activated abilities that commit crimes repeatedly. So it's not trivial to commit crimes, but what does commit a crime is murder. So like having 3 mana up and attacking with this, saying, hey, I have a murder, you can't block me, or you'll get 2 for 1. That is valuable on the muscle. The cards that represent the threat of committing a crime are often more valuable than the cards that get a payoff for committing a crime, just because actually spending the cards that commit a crime is a cost. It is also an outlaw. Most black creatures are an outlaw. It is like a fel orc. It's an ogre. All right, up next, Rakish Crew. I think this is the best black uncommon. It's work, you have to build around it, but I think this is a fantastic card to build around. You don't need to be pure outlaws for this card to be good because it makes an outlaw on its own. It's like Bastion of Remembrance, but the actual bodies are much better, and like you want this in pretty much every black deck except blue black, but like black green and black white both sack a ton of creatures. Black red has the most outlaws. You have to pay attention to your card types, but I think this card is very good and worth building around. I'm gonna go ahead and raise the effort, but I do think that it's just worth it. I think it's worth putting the effort into Rakish Crew. And it stacks so well. Like the more copies of this card you have, the faster you're going to win. It's only awkward because it's not itself a creature, even though it makes a creature, but I think this card's very strong. Because this doesn't trigger once each turn. It's as many times as your outlaws die. This is a very powerful way to end the game. You also even I will splash this card in red white because red white makes so many outlaws. Now your opponent can't block him anymore. Rattleback Apothecary, very cool card. Good reward for committing crimes, but Death Touch in general is good in this set. Not a ton to say about it. Committing the crime to race your opponent. Like this card is very good at racing because Lifelink is good for racing and Menace makes things hard to block, but also just having a Death Toucher is good in so many of the different archetypes. So I gave it a 5 because it's good in so many of the different archetypes. It does feel like they literally shrunk her. It feels like they pressed her together in this picture. Yes, it makes the 1/1 a lot better than vanilla. The other thing about Rattleback Apothecary is it's not once per turn. You can commit a crime to give a creature Menace or Lifelink, meaning you can give this creature Menace, so your opponent has to double block and give up 2 creatures to block it, or you can give your whole team Menace and Lifelink, and that's hard to raise. I'm gonna go ahead and raise the ceiling on this, but I think that generally is gonna play like a 5. Up next, Raven of Fell Omens. This card is only good when you're actively committing crimes. It is not an outlaw, but a 2-mana 1/2 flyer that also drains your opponent a few times is very good. You only want this card when you can commit crimes. If you can't commit crimes, then it's a 2-mana 1/2 that drains your opponent once, and then that's fine, but it's not great. Rictus Robber, cool card. So a 3, this is cool as a plot card because it's variable as a, like, if you ignore the text, this is a 3-mana 4/3 or a 4-mana 4/3. You really do want to, I'm going to go ahead and lower the floor because you really do want to be able to make a 2/2, but it's not a huge problem if you can't. It's still okay as a plottable body with a variable cost. I like the bird a lot. The bird is worth building around, but it's good. The reason it's cool is because if you're the crimes deck, you'll be able to table the Raven. If you're not the crimes deck, you don't want this card. If you want the cards that commit crimes before you get the Raven. I like the Rictus Robber. You just have to make sure your creatures are dying. You can do that by either being very aggressive in black-red or sacrificing creatures in black-white, but it's pretty weak in blue-black and red-black. Or, it's fine in red-black because it does make 2 outlaws. All right, Rooftop Assassin. This one is getting a revisit. Because the thing is, compared to this, we see this effect a lot. Short-hair creature that opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. I like it. It lets your mercenaries upgrade into full removal spells. You attack your mercenary into the creature, they block, and then you get to Rooftop Assassin. But don't be afraid to just cast this on their end step as a 2/2 flying lifelink. It slots nicely into blue when you care about flashing. It slots nicely into anything with mercenaries. And it can commit a crime at instant speed, but it's not easy. Card's just solid. Well, I gave a lot of 5s in black. Might just be really good. Like, all the cards just seem so solid in black. It's not, because the plot cards are very carefully balanced, cover. So a few things about plot. I gotta find the slide. I think it's just useful to talk about this. All right, so there are 0 instant cards with plot. Every single plot can only be cast at sorcery speed. You can't plot a card and cast it in the same turn. So, like, I think this Wolverine's a really good example. It's a 3-mana 3/2 that you can sort of draw a card with it, but you have to decide. It's a decision point, right? It is better than Foretell in that, well, it's just different. It's designed differently from Foretell. So, like, if we ignore the text on this, this is a 4-mana 4/3 or a 3-mana 4/3 next turn, both of which are fine, but the variable cost makes it strong. However, it's great if you can get a zombie out of it. I should probably raise the ceiling on this because you are good at getting zombies out of it. It's an amazing card. Rooftop Assassin we just talked about. Servant of the Stinger. So there's a lot of text on this card. This card is very good as a 2-mana 1/3 Death Touch. It's very good as a 2-mana 1/3. Like, your opponent has to keep blocking this. Like, it eats 2/2s all day long. It really rewards combat tricks, but even just committing 1 crime in order to get a great card out of your deck is solid. I think it's a great card. Right. That's exactly right, Ogre. Yeah, so being able to demonic tutor with a crime is good if you have good things to pick up with it. Plot is only tempo negative in a vacuum dump. Plot is tempo positive with cards like the blue-white cards that reward you for not casting a spell with mana, or the blue-green cards that reduce the cost of plot, or the red-blue cards that reward casting 2 spells in a turn. So it's tempo negative, but only in a vacuum. Generally, there are a lot of ways to reward plot. All right, Shoot the Sheriff. Surprisingly restrictive. Destroy target non-outlaw creature. Like, there are decks with 0 non-outlaw creatures, but 2-mana kill anything is great. So, like, just know that this card is going to be bad sometimes. I'm lowering the floor to a 2. Right. There's a lot of good ways to take advantage of it. There's a lot of good value generating engines in this set. Right. Sorry, I like the song. Yeah, destroy target non-outlaw creature is a real cost. Some decks have none of those. So you won't always have a target for Shoot the Sheriff, but it's still 2 mana kill, very big, and a lot of different things. So it's a solid removal spell, but like I will take murder over this in a lot of situations because there's a lot of outlaws. Skullduggery. This is some work. If you can, normally this is removal spell, give a creature +1/+1. We've seen this card before. In this set, it doesn't kill that much. There's not a lot of X1s to kill with Skullduggery and pump a creature. So you have to put some work into setting it up. You have to attack with 2 creatures and then try and get a full point of value out of it. But it's a good trick. So I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3. It's good if you look at it as a combat trick. It's just okay if you look at it as a removal spell. Yes, so the medium effort is not to do with getting the card into your deck. It's to do with setting up your combats. You have to think about your sequencing. And you may have to give up a block or a point of damage in order to set up the right combination of 2 creatures on your side and 2 creatures on their side. It is nice 1 mana crime. Like, this is a 1 mana crime. I hadn't really thought of it as a 1 mana crime enabler, and I should have. But I don't think that adjusts the score at all. Not enough, anyway. Treasure Dredger. Card's just very good. I have it tied for best black uncommon. Like, 1 mana make a treasure. 1 mana make a treasure is very valuable. I'm going to go ahead and raise the effort. I might drop the score a bit. We're going to give it a revisit. But, like, making a treasure every turn is so good in this set. Even for 1 life. It's fixing in black. It's a must kill, and there are really powerful ways to use those treasures. I think the card's very good. Unfortunate Accident. This is usually going to be 4 mana to destroy a target creature, but the option of 2 mana for a mercenary or 5 mana to destroy a target creature, make a mercenary, very good at instant speed. Card is really consistent and powerful. It's removal you want. It's removal with kicker. Love the card. Take it high. Yeah, I feel like I should have more to say on this. I don't. Like, making outlaws at instant speed is nice. Killing a creature at instant speed is nice. Does a lot of work all around. Unscrupulous Contractor. I need to lower this score because sacrificing the creature isn't free even with the plot. 3 mana for a 3/2 that draws 2 cards is good. 3 mana for a 3/2 that you plot. Like, you can plot this on turn 3 and then on turn 4 maybe make a mercenary and eat the mercenary to draw 2 cards. But like, 2 life's a real cost, and the ability to target your opponent for a crime is not going to come up that often, not unless you're actively killing them. But I like the card. I'll be picking it pretty high. And then our last black card is Vault Plunderer. I need to lower this too. So I rust the black cards a little bit. You might be able to tell. 1 toughness is a big liability. Like, drawing a card, like, I would rather have Phyrexian Raider. I'd rather have 3 mana 2/2 draw a card than 3 mana 3/1 draw a card, because it's just so likely. So the cantrip on this is nice. Drawing cards is good. Having your Outlaws cantrip is relevant in some decks. I like this in black-red, but this isn't a 2-for-1 in the way you would normally think of this style of card. Like, no, if this were a card that drew you a card and then traded with a 3/3, you'd be pretty happy. But it's much more likely that this is a 3-drop, 3/1 that trades with a half a card, a mercenary from your opponent, something that they want to lose anyway. So I like this card on a defensive speed. If I'm a blue-black control deck, then I'm okay playing this card. Like, think of it like a creature with Defender. You want this when you're going to be blocking with it more than when you're going to be attacking with it, because you want to control what this trades with. And in the decks where you can control what this trades with, then you're much happier to play it. But it's not trivial to control what this trades with. So if this is draw a card trade with a 2/2, you're happy. But if this is draw a card trade with a 1/1, there's a lot of 1/1s where you just don't want that to happen. So not as good as it looks at a glance. That's all the black cards. We're going to take a 30-second break because I need water and maybe a cup of tea and some honey for my throat, and then we'll get back to it. Be right back. We're on red next. I might not do all of the overarching stuff as much for red because it's not as important. I'll just do blue, red, and red, green. We already did red, black. Red, white is tokens. All you need to know for red, white is whether you're going wide or combo. And then we'll do red. I'll be right back. Okay. I always forget people can see me eat now. All right. I think the red cards are all sized consistently. They're pretty close. I think I might skip the color overview just because red specifically works much better card by card. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll talk about the removal stats one more time because it's really relevant to how red plays. You know, the really nice thing about doing it this way is I can show off like my teacup. Very carefully labeled so that I don't mix it up with my other cups. Nice. A nice vanilla chai. My puzzle shop is next door to a tea shop. So she always brings in, the woman who runs the tea shop always just like, hey, I have some new teas. You want to try them out? And so, usually they're pretty good. Every once in a while they're duds, but. This kind of streaming is great. Like I enjoy it, but it really destroys my throat because it's a lot of talking without stopping. So tea goes a long way. Okay, so let's do red. Removal stats are important to how red plays. So there's only 4 spells that deal 1 damage, and they kill 9% of creatures. To the 2 damage spells kill 42%. Red actually has a 6 damage spell that kills 98%, and a 5 damage spell that kills 97%. So we'll be keeping that in mind as we go. Red-green is ferocious. It cares about having 4 power, and so all creatures with 4 power that are cheap are inherently a little bit more valuable in red-green. Blue-red cares about casting 2 spells in a turn. So when you're blue-red, you really need to plan your turns out ahead of time and decide where it's okay to give up cards. Like you can come down a few cards for some bounce spells, for some tempo spells. You can make some bad trades because it's really great at generating value, whether that's by drawing cards with singular divination style draw spells or the signpost cards like Crumb. This card's silly. So you get to plot a spell on turn 3. On turn 4, cast Crumb, and then cast the plotted spell. And now you've got a 3/4 flyer that has replaced itself. Blue-red is so good at generating card advantage that you can play cheaper spells that are less relevant occasionally. So when you're playing blue-red, you need to figure out how many spells you want to cast this turn and next turn. There are literal storm effects, things that care about how many spells you cast overall. You also have to think about where you want your removal to go, because sizing the right cost and the right spell at the right time makes a huge difference. Overall, the red cards are the most specifically for one specific archetype. Doesn't mean like they can only be played in that deck, but our first card, Brimstone Roundup, you have to enable it. You have to put effort in. It's very good in blue-red double spell. It's very good in red-black outlaws, but it's not free in either of those things. So you need a lot of cheap spells to make this card work. I would like to... Please take note, Ranger. I'd like to get that fixed because chances are it's not only for you. It might be because of how I'm talking. It might be because of my sensitivity. Well, we'll see what we can do. That's nice. Hey, Duo. Thank you so much. It's good to see ya. It's okay. You were there for a bit. It was also like an 8-hour stream. Catching all of that is a lot. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Let me check my delay. I don't think I have any delay on, but... Bitrate looks right. My audio has no delay. And my video output has no delay. Huh, I'm sorry, I don't know why that. My bad. Please let me know if it comes back, because maybe there's something I can do about it on this end. All right, so Brimstone Roundup, very cool card. 2 mana. So you cast this spell on, the plot is more than the regular cost. You cast a spell on turn 2, if and only if you can cast 2 spells on turn 3, but it's a little awkward because you're giving up tempo to do that. So like, if you have a 1-drop and then 2 more 1-drops, then, and you're a very aggressive deck, you usually don't want to take a turn off on turn 2 in order to cast your 2 spells on turn 3. But you can plot this on turn 3. You have to take turn 3 off, and then on turn 4 cast this for free with a 4-mana spell and make a 1/1. So overall, this isn't really an aggressive card, even though it makes 1/1s. It's an engine card. You have to build an engine out of this, which is why I gave it a high effort. That floor of a 2, like, you have to reliably, you're not going to be able to trigger this fast enough to make those relevant bodies, but you might be able to trigger this consistently enough to make 5, 6, 7, 8 bodies out of this over the course of a long game. So the red-white decks aren't always aggressive. The red-white decks are often going to be engine-based and kind of combo-oriented. Just, you're going to use lots of mercenaries to power up specific things. Really cool card, nice build around, not as aggressive as it seems with its 2 mana value. Thank you. All right, next card, Caught in the Crossfire. This is a very cool card. This is always going to be at least 3 mana. You have to decide whether 3 mana deal 2 damage to each outlaw or 3 mana deal 2 damage to each non-outlaw is good for you. If you are an Outlaws deck and your opponent is not an Outlaws deck, put this in your main deck. If you are any other deck, you're going to want this in the sideboard, where it's going to be a very good sideboard card. Even just clearing out the mercenaries is pretty nice. 4 mana deal 2 to everything is a little weak, but at instant speed, you'll find relevant uses for it. It's solid without being amazing. Compared to the last card, which was 2/8 with full 4, this one is 2 to 6 out of 4. But it's less work than the other one. It's a kind of controlling card, but if you are a deck trying to set up an engine, maybe you're a blue-red twin spell deck or a red-white long game deck, you are happy to have a way to clear all the tiny creatures. This is right. Well, the flavor works here, Ogre, because like, you're not actually hurting anybody. You're just getting caught in the crossfire. That's not a crime. Oh, this is really good. All right, Cunning Coyote. This card's just very efficient, very good. 2 mana 2/2 with haste that pumps another creature and grants haste is great. And if you have a 3-drop that you want to attack with on the following turn, just plot it and then play your 3-drop and give that 3-drop +1/+1 in haste. Card is efficient, does what you want it to do across the board. It works in most archetypes, which is unusual for the red cards. Just a great attacker. Yeah. It's really good too. Cunning Coyote. Cunning Coyote. Up next, Dead-Eyed Duelist. This is one that I came back to a few times. This is the best card for committing crimes at common or uncommon in the whole set. It's the only repeated way to commit a crime for less than 4 mana. That's not true, there's a 3 mana one. It's the only repeated way to commit a crime that you are interested in consistently, period. Yeah, pay 1, do crime is incredibly powerful, and being on a 2 mana 1/3 reach is so good. Like, you can commit a crime consistently on your opponent's turn. It blocks all the 2/2 flyers, it blocks all the 2/1 flyers. This is my pick for best red common, I think. Yes, this is my pick for best red common. It's not, there's one card that's pretty close, but this card, the fact that this card is so powerful speaks to how cool the design of this set is. Just committing a crime every turn is so good. Pay 1, do crime. Yeah, Prickly Pears is the other 6. That card's actually easier to use than Deadeye Duelist. You need less around it, but Deadeye Duelist is the 2-drop every red deck wants. It's comparable to Sunshot Militia in LCI, but it stacks better. The O3 that taps and untaps is good, but your opponent does have to have a creature in play. Hey, Night Dark. Your opponent has to have a creature in play for that one, which is kind of a problem. Yeah, so this is the best Crimer in the set. There might be good rare Crimers. I haven't seen all the Crimers. I'm calling them Crimers. But yes, this card is deceptively powerful. Because if you have having 4 Sunshot Militias is worse than having 1 Sunshot Militia and 3 other creatures, any other creatures. But having 3 Deadeye Duelists means your opponent never gets to attack with a 3/3, or a 2/2, or a 1/1, or a 2/1, or a 3/1, or a 4/2, or anything smaller, anything with less than 9 power. And you get to trigger a crime. Like, if you have 2 copies of this card, then you get to trigger a crime on your turn and your opponent's turn every turn. Is that a rare? I haven't seen it. This is just for draft. You know... I'm sorry, Herbivore. The word criminal never occurred to me. It never occurred to me to call Deadeye Duelist a criminal, but it's too late. It's a crimer. They are all crimers now. It didn't cut. Thermal Alchemist. So this is for draft specifically. We are talking about drafting this set. The catapult's good though. Okay. Yeah, they're crimers, not criminals. I'm sorry. If you had gotten to me earlier, they would be criminals. What is an elemental dragon? There's an elemental dragon here? Can somebody tell me what the elemental dragon is? All right, Demonic Ruckus. It's just solid. The reason this card is it's better than we see this kind of effect before. Even 2 mana for +1/+1 and trample that draws a card is pretty weak. The fact that you can plot this on turn 1 until you need it, until it's safe, is very good. If you can't plot this on turn 1, it's kind of weak. But like if this is one, this is useful for double spelling, and it's useful when your creatures are going to be dying. Overall, it's going to feel just fine, and there are good options for a pump spell, but I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3. Some decks really, if you're trying to twin spell, this card is fantastic. This card is really good for twin spelling. Yeah, Terror of the Peaks is silly. Yeah, I mean, the card, like, the more you care about Menace, the more you care about Trample, the more you care about twin spelling, the higher this climbs towards the ceiling. But like, I'm not going to pick it pack 1. I want to already have those cards. Discerning Peddler. This card is very efficient. I'm raising this to a 5. I meant to raise this to a 5 earlier. I just forgot. Because it's a, like, 2 mana 2/2 Rummage is just good. 2 mana 2/2 fix your hand up a little is powerful, and it's a rogue. Rummaging is something you're actively interested in doing. There's a card with Madness. There are cards that care about your graveyard. I like the Peddler. If you're red, you want to play this. Explosive Derailment. So the way this works with Spree is this is either 3 mana, deal 4 damage to target creature, which kills 87% of the creatures in the set for 3 mana. That's a great deal. Or 5 mana, destroy target creature and destroy target artifact, or 3 mana, destroy target artifact. And all of the modes are good. You will use all 3 modes on this card pretty happily. That ceiling is the modality of it. Being able to play all 3 modes is great. Also, flavor text, bombs and trains and sabotage. That's all we need. So this is one of the better red removal spells. I like it a lot. Killing artifacts is difficult and valuable in this format. But you often, like, I don't know if I would play Disenchant. I wouldn't play Shatter. I would play Explosive Derailment, because being able to pick off even just a random treasure or equipment is relevant. Like, that 2 mana kicker of destroy target artifact makes this card very good. So I gave it a 6 with a ceiling of a 6, and it's usually going to play at that ceiling. I love Breaches. I love Breaches as a character. He's just a goblin pirate who, like, he's very supportive. He really wants to help everybody blow up their trains. Like, as long as you're blowing up trains, he's got your back. Look, the picture tells the story. The story is somebody has used a bomb to derail a train. The flavor text is just how Breaches feels about it. All right, up next, Pharaohification. This card is a lot harder to use than it seems to be at first glance. Giving every creature you play for the rest of the game menace and haste is good. Pumping a creature when you need to pump a creature is good, but taking turn 3 off to resolve this spell is not. You have to have, it's less that this card is bad and more that you have other things, like you have a limited number of turns that you can take off in this format. You can only give up so much tempo, and you're going to be giving those turns up to plot. Verification, competes with those plot cards, and it usually loses. If you have the right deck for this, if you have a lot of flyers or cards that, like, look, the menace and haste is useful. The +2/+0 is usually going to be better in the form of mercenaries, and the time you take off to cast this card is usually going to be better spent plotting something. That doesn't mean this card is unplayable, but it's the worst version of most of what you want to do. Yes, Strange is accurate. It's almost green. If it weren't haste and menace, it would probably be green. It's just very awkward in this set and a little homeless. However, enough cards care about having 4 power, and there are few enough cards with plot in the Gruul deck that it has a place in that deck. Being able to turn all of your 2 power attackers into 4 power attackers is useful in Gruul. So it's not totally homeless. It's just a little worse than a lot of the other things you can be doing. Yes, before you attack at the beginning of combat, you choose this. You can think of it like an equipment. Or there was one in the last set that gave +2/+0 in Vigilance. That card was really good if your deck was all flyers. Yeah, but taking turn, not casting a body on turn 3 is a huge cost. So like you have to be prepared to pay that cost. Up next, Fling. Love Fling. Oh my god. So I gave this the actual score it should have. I will be taking it higher than I should because of my personal love for Fling. Fling is good if you are dealing 4 or more damage. You can set things up to deal 4 or more damage. You also have decks that care about having large creatures. You can also so the best use of Fling is to have a creature in play, have 6 mercenaries, pump your creature with your 6 mercenaries, and fling it. There are lots of good uses for this card, but on its own, it's just fine. I love it. I'm going to take it all the time, but you should not take Fling as highly as I take Fling. I just love Fling. Fling is one of my favorite Magic cards. All right, yeah, it's best in Gruul. I take it very high in Gruul, and maybe in some of the black decks. But generally, it's going to be just okay a lot of the time. Yes, there is a very good threaten that makes this card better too, and we will talk about that shortly. There's only one threaten effect, and it's good. MC? All right, tea's all done. Anyone read leaves? Can anyone read tea leaves? There's one. So there's one blue one that swaps creatures, and there's one threaten that borrows a creature until end of turn. The reason that the ceiling on Fling is so high is because that threaten is really good. It's one of the best threatens we've had in a really long time. We'll talk about it soon. Gila Courser. 3 mana 4/2 is great in Gruul. It's a fragile. This card is very fragile. If you can saddle this reliably and force the attack through, is good, but that's some work. I'm gonna go ahead and raise both the ceiling on this and the effort, because if you can get a couple attacks out of this, you're gonna win the game. You have until the end of your next turn, not just this turn. But a 3 mana 4/2 is great in Gruul, and generating all of the cards is really powerful. If you can, but saddling is a cost in red. Saddling is not a cost for everybody. In red, saddling is a cost. Tapping an untapped creature to enable this makes it a little bit harder to use. But having 4 power for 3 mana is very good in Gruul specifically. So if you are Gruul, take this card much higher and work to enable it. If you're not Gruul, you don't have to worry too much about it. Oh, thanks, Ninja. Appreciate that. I love the evolutions. Like, I love this shirt. Like, stained glass evolutions is so nice. Yes, the swap. There's a card that swaps. It's a spree card, and you can swap creatures, and you can swap a creature and an enchantment and an artifact, and like you can give people a treasure for an equipment. There's some cool things you can do with it. All right, up next I've got Hellspur Brute. Card's great in the Outlaws deck, pretty weak elsewhere. You really want this to be castable for 3 mana. If you can reliably cast this for 3 mana, it's a 6. If you can't, it's fine. Like, if it's a 4 mana 5/4 with trample, it's fine. But Outlaw Affinity is cool, and you can get this down to 1 mana in a lot of decks. So, like, I should probably raise... Nah, 6 is fine as a ceiling for this. Because it's only... You can double spell with it later, which is nice, but it's always going to be a 5/4 trample, which is a little fragile. I like the card a lot, though, and a lot of decks want this. It's less archetype dependent and more other cards dependent. Like, do you have majority outlaws? Do you have the ability to make multiple outlaws with 1 card? Can you make a bunch of mercenaries? Then this card gets really good. But the time it takes to build up your outlaws means that is less likely you're going to get extra value over the cost reduction. I will give this a revisit because there's a chance that there's some rares that combo with it. There's a chance that there's a few cards that make it really easy to cast. This is cool. Yeah, so it's not about the cost as much as the timing. So yes, you can get this to 3. If you can play this for 3 mana on turn 3, that's insane. That wins the game. If you can play this for 3 mana on turn 7 or 8, that's just fine. But you know what? One sec. What is the... One sec. Type. We gotta do it over here. We're gonna go at common and uncommon. OTJ, common, uncommon. Then type mercenary or type assassin or type warlock or type... What are the other ones? Mercenary. All right. Assassin, mercenary, pirate, rogue, warlock. Assassin, mercenary, pirate, rogue, warlock. Assassin, mercenary, pirate, rogue, or type rogue. Or oracle, mercenary for the tokens. What we care about are 1-drops. And then sorted by mana value. So let's see. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are only 4 1-drops that meet those criteria. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you have one of these 4 cards, then you have a turn 1 rogue, turn 1 outlaw, turn 2 outlaw, turn 3. Oh, these are all the stats. Creature keyword, rarity. No, I need creature type rarity. Most of them are not at common. So this is the data I use to make these spreadsheets. So by color. No, that's not helpful. I need creature type by color. Okay, yeah. So it's very difficult to have the 1 mana outlaw, and the 2 mana outlaw. But if you have 1 mana outlaw, 2 mana outlaw, 3 mana Hellspur Brute, you're winning that game. I don't think that's very common, but if you can do it, do it. Like, it does change your game plan up a little bit, because then you go turn 1 outlaw, turn 2 outlaw, turn 3 brute. Then you start focusing on the reach, the late game kills. But turn 4 or 5 is fine. Turn 4 or 5, if you play this on turn 4 or 5, then this is a 4. Like that's how I measure the cards. If you play this on turn 4 or 5 with an additional spell, the twin spell, that's also quite good. That pushes it up towards the ceiling of a 7. But if this is the only card you play on turn 4 or turn 5, then it's just average. So put the work in. You'll get more value out of this card. If you find a way to get it on turn 2 in Draft Kaiser, I'll give you a little placard that says achievement unlocked. Highway Robbery. Card's fine. Like, being able to plot it is good. If you're twin spelling for blue-red, that's great. If you care about sacrificing cards, that's great. If you have Terminal Agony, the black-red breaking news card that has madness, this card's great. Otherwise, it's fine. Just fine. It does generate some value, and you can like generate treasures to make it work. Outlaws is good. Outlaws is going to be very strong. It's also easier than Mounts. All right, Wolverine. Card's great when you're twin spelling. It's not as aggressive as it looks, but like if you are drawing a card with it, it's going to be a 6. If you're not drawing a card with it, it's going to be a 3. A 3/2 is a bit of a liability in this set because it trades down with the 2-drop. So you really want to try and get the second card out of it, and that's not free. But I do like it. That's the new Tormenting Voice Domino. So this card is better than it normally is. So is every other card in the set. There are 0 bad cards in the set. So like, they upgraded the Tormenting Voice to match the rest of the set. Card's good. It's just not being an instant hurts, and it doesn't really interact with any of the specific archetypes. But having the options, as long as you have something to sacrifice or discard, you're happy to play it. Outlaws is much better than Party Kaiser, because if you have 5 mercenaries, you're still fine. Yeah, I gave it a 4 with a ceiling of 6. You're going to try, so you might notice that a lot of the red cards have high ceilings but low averages. That's because they're not very flexible. So out of all the colors, the red cards fall the most into one specific archetype. And that lack of flexibility is why the most flexible cards tend to have the highest scores in red specifically. Because you'll take Deadeye Duelist and Cunning Coyote higher than you would a Demonic Ruckus or a Ferocification, because those cards only work in specific archetypes. That would be cool. Just borrow land until end of turn. People don't like that kind of thing, but I do. All right, Iron Fist Pulverizer. A 5-mana 4/5 with reach is pretty cool. Dealing 2 damage to your opponent, scrying 1 is pretty cool. This is not free to play. It's replaceable at a 5-drop. But if you're twin spelling and you just need a body, card's going to do really well for you. And a 4/5 with reach is a wall. It is really hard to attack through the Pulverizer. All right, Longhorn Sharpshooter. This is one of the best red uncommons. A 3-mana 3/3 with reach is just good. A 3-mana 3/3 with reach is good in this set. A 4-mana plotted 3/3 that shocks something is very good. This is usually going to be worth 2 cards wherever you play it. Also, plotting for an uncounterable crime is useful. This is a cool card. It's a rogue. You can plot it. It goes into most of the archetypes, so I gave it a 6. Magebane Lizard. Card's just good. I gave it a floor of a 5 and a score of a 5. It's almost always going to play at that 5 floor because a 2-mana 1/4 is just solid in this set. It's a 2-mana 1/4 that pings your opponent a few times over the course of the game, but it shuts down a few specific strategies, which is why that ceiling's a 6. But those strategies are so specific that I don't usually bother like accounting for them. I just want to play this. I want to evaluate this at the floor. It's not an outlaw, which actually means I'm going to lower the floor to a 4. Like, it doesn't work in some decks, but a 4 toughness body is very useful with the mercenaries that red likes to make. I like it in general, and I'll take it as a solid 2-drop. Red just has good 2-drops. Mine Raider. It's not trivial to make a treasure with this. If this were 3-mana 3/2 make a treasure, I would play every copy every time. Copper, did you just sub? Thank you so much. That's really sweet of you. I appreciate that. I didn't get the notification for it, and I'm very sorry, but I really appreciate it. Thank you. If this card is making a treasure, this card is great. Play it at a 4 or 5. If it's not making a treasure, this card is bad and you don't want to play it. So make sure you pack your deck with 2 mana Outlaws for Mind Raider to be good. Yeah, that's it. You just need a lot of other Outlaws to make Mind Raider good. It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. Plot helps a lot because there's a lot of Outlaws you can plot and then use the Mind Raider for. Cool card, not good outside of a dedicated Outlaw deck. Outlaw's Fury. So this is the finisher that some of your decks want. There's a lot of good go wide options, and it's less archetype specific than something you build around. Being able to use Outlaw's Fury with a big pile of mercenaries and red white is very good, but really just anytime you're trying to go wide, this card is fine. The difference between Outlaw's Fury and something like On the Job in the last set is it doesn't grant any toughness. So not granting any toughness means it's pretty much a purely offensive spell. You may occasionally have to use the fail case of giving one creature +2/+0 in order to trade up and then drawing a card, but it doesn't go into every deck. You need a lot of bodies. However, you can get those bodies in just red. There's a lot of ways to put 2 creatures into play off of one card or play a spell and get a free mercenary, and then you're pretty happy with Outlaw's Fury. So what the second ability, what it lets you do is trade up. So it's weak in general, but if you attack with 2 3/3s and your opponent has 2 5/5s, then you can play the Outlaw's Fury and it keeps it from being a 3/4/2. Like if you have, it makes the fail case better. I'm gonna lower the floor. The fail case of your opponent, of your 1/1 trading up with a 3/3 and you drawing a card is a lot less devastating. I'm so sorry, puppy. I'm almost done. I'll take you soon. He's like, it's time. You're late, but I want to finish all the red cards. Sorry, pup. All right. Prickly Pear. This card is really good. 3 mana 2/2. Make a mercenary. It's good in aristocrats. Makes 2 outlaws. Makes 2 bodies. Lets you go wide. I gave it a ceiling of a 6. It's almost always going to play at that ceiling of a 6. Card is just good. 3 mana for a 3/3 worth of power spread across 2 bodies is incredibly good, and it's even better than usual because you can play the Prickly Pear and then use the mercenary to attack as a 3/2 most of the time. Card is really good. Quick Draw. It's reasonable pump spells. There's not a ton that has first strike or double strike, but it's nice always winning a combat. It lets you win a combat. So it's a reasonable combat trick with better options available. If you are short on removal or have no other combat tricks, you can take the Quick Draw. It is also a 1 mana way to commit a crime. So if you are a heavy crime deck, or if you are an aggressive crime deck, then Quick Draw is good. But it's not free. Reasonable trick with a reasonable ceiling. I gave it a high ceiling. It's just not easy to get it to that ceiling. You have better things you want to do. But like if you're a blue-red deck that cares about committing crimes and cares about casting 2 spells, then this is a filler card that will work without being the strongest available option. Quill Charger. Cards are sufficient. You have to be saddling this for it to be reasonable, but like its amount, it's a 4 mana 4/3 that attacks as a 5/5 with menace. That's a real body. It hits pretty hard. There's just replaceable things you can do at 4 mana, and you'd rather it be an outlaw than a mount. Saddling 2 is an actual cost, but is one that you're not upset to play. I'm pretty likely to splash this card in the mounts deck, but I'm not likely to take it highly if I'm a red deck. Reckless Lackey. This is one of those 1 mana rogues or outlaws. It's solid without being great. You really want to be growing it. If you have ways to grow the Lackey, it gets good fast. And the fail case of cycling it, just drawing a card and making a treasure, makes it not awful to play. I'm going to go ahead and raise the floor to a 4. It's usually going to play as a 4. I like the card, but it's not something you want to take highly unless you're a very aggressive Outlaws deck, or you can just be an aggressive deck in general. It combos really well with a bunch of mercenaries. So if you have, I'm raising the ceiling too. If you have a big pile of mercenaries, then you can pour all of the mercenaries into the Lackey and it'll just keep attacking. I like the Layard too. It's a cool card. It's just okay. It takes a lot of work. I'm raising the effort too. But I just changed 3 stats. I changed all the stats except the one that matters. All right, up next, Resilient Roadrunner. 2 mana, 2/2 with haste, pro coyote. Becomes unblockable. It's an efficient attacker. You want to be very aggressive. Solid card, no relevant typing. Not as good as the coyote, but great against the coyote. It is. It's a cool card. It's just you have to be really aggressive to want to play it. Return the Favor. If you get to counter a removal spell and copy a removal spell, you're going to win the game. But that's not free, and that's 4 mana. I like this card a lot. I like that every color has a protection spell in this format. We don't usually see that. Every color has some way to protect its creatures, and Return the Favor is very swingy. It'll either be stuck in your hand or win you the game. That's why I gave it a floor of 2 and a ceiling of 6. Rodeo Pyromancer. This one's getting a revisit. I think it might be great, but like red is weird to work with. It enables twin spelling really well on a not horrible body, and it never works the turn you play it. But 2 mana is a lot. Like you can plot a card turn 3, play Rodeo Pyromancer's turn 4, and then turn 5 you have 7 mana available. Because when you cast that first spell, it generates 2 mana, and now you can play a 7 mana spell. I haven't seen the rares yet. That's kind of why I think there are some rares that will work really good here. But I haven't seen them all yet, so I'm gonna have to go look at them all first. I need to evaluate the rest of the 3 mana plot spells and the rares. Scalestorm Summoner. Love this card. I think it's so powerful. It's not that hard to even get the summoner itself to 4 power. And this generates 1 dinosaur you're winning. There's even a lot of ways to give it haste to generate the dinosaur right away. But a 3 mana 3/3 that makes a 3/1 every attack is so good. And it has relevant timing. This card is very powerful. This is my pick for best red uncommon. Even though it's not... It doesn't do anything by itself. By itself, it's just a 3 mana 3/3. But a 3 mana 3/3 that makes a 3/1 every attack is silly. Scorching Shot, better than usual. 2 mana, destroy target creature is how this works out. It kills 97% of all creatures in this set, which is higher than usual. But like killing almost everything for only red is very powerful. Like this is 2 mana, destroy target creature. I'd love to see Crackle with Power. I haven't seen it yet, but I got to go through all the list cards too. I haven't seen them all because I did the set review before the list was spoiled or the big scorecards were spoiled. I haven't seen them all. Skewer the Critics. Good, flexible. Usually you're going to want to hit and then skewer. I'm giving this one a revisit as well. It might be even better. Like the thing is, it's valuable for twin spelling. It is valuable. I'm raising the score on Skewer because it's good for twin spelling and it's good for so there was a great designer search question a long time ago, and it was like red, deal 9 damage to target creature, and the question was, what's wrong with this card? And the answer was that it broke the color pie because it's too close to black's destroy target creature, and apparently they don't care anymore. I mean, like Roast exists. Roast is 2 mana, deal 5. Yes, it does. That's what I was thinking of specifically. Like there's a lot of good ways to enable Skewer and have the bolt, but it's good for twin spelling. It's good for, there's just a lot of good ways to enable Spectacle when you need it, and is Lightning Bolt a lot more often than I thought when I first rated this card. It's just good in general. Like it bolts everything. Robert, thanks so much for the sub. All right, here's the threaten. Take for a ride. Cards really good. 3 mana, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste. That's an effect we've seen before. It's solid. It works, and it you can take it and sacrifice in this set. You can take it for a finishing attack if you're aggressive. There's a reason they don't print this effect at instant speed. Being able to take your opponent's 5/5 and block your opponent's 5/5 is backbreaking. It's absolutely devastating. This card is flexible, it's powerful, and it changes how attacks have to be made. This card is really good. No worries, IQ, don't stress. We're almost done. We're only 2 cards left. Yes, stealing like committing a crime and then taking your opponent's creature to block with it is so good. It's really powerful. It's only bad if your opponent only has one creature. It's only bad on defense if your opponent has but a single creature in play. And it's still good on offense if your opponent has a single creature in play. Like, this is threatened but more flexible than we've seen. Very powerful. Thunder Salvo. You want this card to deal 3 damage. If you get this card to deal 3 damage, it's good. If it deals 2 damage on turn 2, it's good. Otherwise, it's fine. But it's not that hard to make it deal the damage you need it to do. So I gave it a 5 with a ceiling of a 5, and it'll usually play near that ceiling. Up next, Trick Shot. It kills 98% of all creatures in the set, and it's basically 5 mana, destroy a target creature plus a mercenary. I'm going to go ahead and lower the floor because this is expensive for a removal spell, and it's not something you always want to play. Just kind of solid. Oof. Okay, that is all the black and red cards. Do we have any questions about any of those cards before you call? I'll be very happy to answer them. We can go see Jaffer. Oh, Echo Bravo is drafting. Sandy's playing Baldur's Gate 3. I'm kind of interested in that. Oh, we can go see Komori Kujo. Oh, we're gonna go see Troy. He earned it because he won everything. Oh, Rebel. Rebel. Dina wants to say hello. Come here. He knows I want to pick him up to show him to the camera. Come here. Come here. He's like, please, no, I just want to go for a walk. Good boy. All right, I think that's as good as it's gonna get for now. I'll pick him up next time. He's reluctant to leave the door because I usually take him at 6:30, and he's like, "You're late. You're late." He's decided that I'm late. All right, so that's gonna be it for today's set review. I'm gonna bring you over to Troy. He is a good guy, and he just won the tournament. I think that has earned the raid more than sufficiently, and it's also we're friends.